Have you ever found yourself paralyzed by too many choices, afraid to commit, or constantly doubting your path in life? You're not alone and you're not broken. You're human. And according to Michel de Montaigne, one of the most influential philosophers of the Renaissance, that confusion you feel might not be a problem at all. It might be the doorway to freedom that we grow up in a world obsessed with certainty. We're taught that confidence equals competence, that indecision is weakness, and that we should always know what we want. But Montaigne challenged all of that. He believed that the smartest people are the ones who doubt not because they're lost, but because they're honest. He wrote, "It is uncertainty that makes us wise." At first, that sounds backwards. We assume wisdom means having answers, not questions. But Montaigne flipped that idea on its head. To him, doubt wasn't an obstacle, it was a compass. A sign you're still awake, still thinking, still alive. So, why do we fear uncertainty so much? Because we've been sold a fantasy of control. We want to plan everything, predict everything. And when life doesn't follow our script, we panic. But the truth is, life has never followed anyone's script. The future is always unpredictable. The only real control we have is how we relate to that unpredictability. Here's the kicker. The more we resist uncertainty, the more power it has over us. The more we try to lock life into a fixed shape, the more brittle we become, fragile, anxious, reactive. But when we embrace the unknown, we begin to expand. We grow more flexible. We stop needing to be right all the time. We let go of the crushing weight of always having to figure it out. Have you ever met someone who seems calm no matter what happens? The kind of person who can face sudden changes or chaos with grace, even curiosity. That's not because they have all the answers. It's because they've made peace with not knowing. This doesn't mean we stop trying or that we give up on making plans. Montaigne wasn't promoting laziness or indifference. He was pointing to deeper strength, kind of emotional resilience, one that comes from accepting how unpredictable life truly is. And here's something powerful. When you stop needing to know everything, you finally start noticing what's actually here. Certainty often blinds us. We get so fixated on one outcome that we miss all the other possibilities. But when you loosen your grip even just a little, you open yourself up to surprise, to wonder, to growth. That's where life begins, not in control, but in curiosity. So maybe the problem isn't that we don't know where we're going. Maybe the problem is we think we're supposed to. Let's be honest. How many times has your life gone exactly according to plan? How many of your biggest insights, relationships, or turning points were things you expected? Uncertainty is not the enemy. It's the soil of transformation. But don't just take Montaigne's word for it. Think about your own experience. What if the moments you were most unsure were actually the ones where you were most alive? Asterisk, we live in a culture that worships certainty. People chase answers like trophies, build routines like fortresses, and cling to identities as if they are shields against chaos. But Montaigne looked at this obsession and asked a deeper question. What if our need for certainty is actually making us suffer? Think about it. How often have you stayed in a job, relationship, or belief system not because it nourished you, but because it felt safe? How many dreams have you postponed because the future felt too unclear? We convince ourselves that certainty is the path to security. But in reality, it often becomes the prison we build for ourselves. Montaigne wasn't telling us to destroy our plans or abandon reason. He was inviting us to loosen our grip, to see that holding on too tightly to ideas, expectations, or even versions of ourselves can become a form of silent torment. He wrote, "A man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears." In other words, the anxiety we carry while trying to avoid uncertainty is already a kind of pain. The very act of resisting the unknown makes us tense, makes us shrink. makes us afraid to live. Here's the paradox. Certainty feels safe, but it often costs us our freedom. Because when you already know how things are supposed to go, you stop exploring, you stop asking questions, you stop growing. Have you ever met someone so certain about everything that they've become rigid? Their worldview doesn't allow for mystery, for contradiction, for change. They're not confident, they're closed. And that closure, ironically, makes them fragile. One unexpected moment and their whole world shatters. But when you allow yourself to be uncertain, when you say, I don't know, and that's okay, you unlock something powerful. You become curious again. You become humble. You become open. Montaigne once compared the mind to a garden. If it's overgrown with dogma and fixed beliefs, nothing new can take root. But when we make space, when we pull out the weeds of rigid thinking, we allow something living to grow. And here's the truth most people avoid. The only constant in life is change. Trying to resist change is like trying to stop the ocean with your hands. It only exhausts you and leaves you drenched in fear. So what if instead of fearing uncertainty, we treated it like a teacher? Not the cruel kind that punishes mistakes, but the kind that challenges you to think deeper, to feel more, to live wider. Uncertainty asks us to slow down, to pay attention, to stay present. And in a world that's always racing toward the next achievement. That's a rare and radical thing. Asterisk, most people think surrender means weakness. That giving up control is the same as giving up power. But Montaigne flips that idea on its head. For him, true power comes from inner flexibility, not rigid dominance. He observed how people obsess over controlling their image, their future, and even the people around them. But the more control they chase, the more anxious they become. Why? Because life doesn't follow commands. It flows. It surprises. And when we try to force it, we create resistance, not results. Have you ever clung to a plan only to watch it fall apart? Or held on to a role or identity long after it stopped serving you, just because letting go felt scary? We've all been there. And Montaigne would say, the fear is normal. But the response can evolve. He believed that embracing life's uncertainty doesn't make you passive, it makes you adaptable. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care more about truth than illusion. He said, my life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. This quote might make you smile, but it reveals a truth we all need to hear. Our minds create suffering from things that aren't even real yet. The endless what-ifs. The imaginary disasters, the mental rehearsals for pain that never arrives. We waste so much of our strength preparing for battles that don't exist. But surrendering doesn't mean being careless, it means shifting your energy. Instead of fighting uncertainty, you move with it. Instead of clinging to old stories, you rewrite them. Instead of pretending you're in full control, you become a student of life. And ironically, this is what makes you stronger than most, because the truly strong are not the ones who never fall apart. They're the ones who know how to rebuild. Letting go becomes a kind of freedom. You stop forcing people to fit your expectations. You stop resenting yourself for not being perfect. You allow space for discomfort, for healing, for growth. This is emotional maturity. And Montaigne saw it not as something reserved for monks or philosophers, but as an everyday art, a discipline of the soul. So the next time you feel like you're losing control, maybe don't fight it. Maybe ask, what if this loss is really an opening? What if this chaos is clearing the path? What if the reason you're tired isn't because you're doing too much, but because you're holding on too tightly? Michel de Montaigne believed that much of our suffering doesn't come from events themselves, but from our refusal to flow with. Then we resist, we attach, we expect. And in doing so, we build invisible prisons inside our minds. He once said, he who establishes his life on hope will end in despair. That sounds harsh. But what he meant wasn't to give up on dreams. He was warning us about the danger of depending too much on how cope is beautiful. But when it becomes a demand, when your joy is postponed until some future success becomes a trap, you start living not for now, but for someday. And someday never feels close enough. So Montaigne invites us to do something radical, to live without needing a guarantee, to let the moment matter, not because it leads to something, but because it's already something. Letting go isn't just about peace, it's about depth. Because when you're not fixated on controlling everything, you finally start noticing the small things. The tone of someone's voice, the softness of sunlight, the breath in your chest. Life becomes richer not because it changed, but because you did, you returned, you stopped sprinting to the next milestone and remembered what it feels like to actually exist. Montaigne reminds us that we are not machines. We are not here to optimize every second. We're here to live, to stumble, to learn, and most of all, to accept the ever-changing nature of everything around us and within us. So if you're waiting for the perfect plan, the perfect clarity, the perfect version of yourself to finally enjoy life, stop. There's no perfect version. There's only this moment, and that is more than enough.